Welcome to the Asian American Forward podcast. My name is Katie Simpson, and I'm here this week with my regular co-host, Don Sun. Hi, Don.
Hi, Katie. Hi, everyone.
It's good to talk to you this week, and I cannot believe that it's already March of 2021. It seems like New Year's was like literally yesterday. And so being March, we are about a year out from the anniversary of the pandemic in the US. There were like cases here, like starting in mid to late February, if I remember correctly, like in Washington State. But sort of the week that I count everything as starting is like the week of March 13th or so. Does that sound right to your memory?
Yeah, March 17th, something around there.
Yeah. So it being about a year out from the anniversary of this event that's like affected all of our lives, we wanted to take this opportunity to reflect on, how things have changed and maybe what things will change going forward about the world and our lives with the pandemic. So Don has come up with a list of 10 things that he noticed changing this year and that we're going to talk through and maybe have some debate about, because I'm not sure I agree with all of his items. But before we get into that, I did want to just give us an opportunity and our audience an opportunity to reflect on what this year has been like for them. So Don, do you have anything personal that you wanted to share from your year of pandemic that was impactful for you or that you want to share with our audience?
Yeah, I think it's at this moment in the past year, most times I was like everyone else, most times stay at home. But for me, I try to travel as much as possible. So almost every weekend, if not every weekend, probably it's twice a month, I'm going to travel. So it's I take advantage. The airport is empty, security, no one going to go through, airplane is empty. Every hotel I went, it's almost empty. So it's only one or two guests there. So the entire hotel is just for you. So I can pick up an ocean view of the hotel and pay very, very minimum money for the hotel, for the airplane. So it's as long as you have a face mask in the public place, I do enjoy this year's travel. And I put the goal is every state I didn't go, I'll try to put into the calendar because it's a remote work. And the most time is our staff is to have a remote Zoom meeting together, just like you and me. And then it's I can still work and I can still travel. The things is I'm pretty, at the one side, pretty enjoy this kind of a lifestyle and didn't worry too much about the COVID at this moment. That's the part of my enjoyment for this particular COVID. But the people is a little bit scared. They make a comment. And the worst thing is for me, I do lose a lot of in-person interaction and the friendship. I'm the person always try to get a party, meet people, talk to strangers.
Of course you are.
But I suffered that part is very much. But we have to tell audience, you and me start this program versus Zoom. And we never have a lunch or dinner
we've never met in person.
That's the ridiculous.
I have no idea how tall you are because I've only seen your shoulders.
Yeah, I'm very short, okay? But it's okay. It's I don't mind how tall you are.
I'm also really short.
Yeah, okay. I'm 5'9". So I don't know. That's in Chinese. That's just the middle range. But it's okay. I'm not going to say you cannot find a girlfriend anymore. Those kind of things. Not too short, right?
Where have you traveled this year?
I traveled. Most times I went to the Southern California very often. So it's because the coastline, there's all the hotel open. So I travel Southern California a lot, and Arizona, and Texas, and also Idaho, and I also went to East Coast, like North Carolina, South Carolina, New York, Washington D.C.
You've
Almost,
really been everywhere this year. That's
yeah.
great.
I went to a lot of places.
I have to say, I've actually done more traveling than you would expect this year too. I moved across the country kind of twice. So when the pandemic started, I was in college in Massachusetts, and I went home to quarantine with my family in Tennessee and spent the summer there. And then in the fall, I moved here to California. So I've kind of like been from East to West Coast since last March, which is crazy. I was saying to my mom that I have seen both the Atlantic and the Pacific Ocean this year, and graduated from college. But I feel like the thing I'm most proud of from my year of pandemic is I have gotten so good at making homemade bread. It's incredible. Like, I just have the best sandwiches all the time now because I'm at home and I have enough time to like really baby my sourdough starter that I grew.
That's good. Yeah.
Well, I am excited to get into it with you and do some predictions. This is one of my favorite things. And of course, we don't have a crystal ball. So it'll be interesting also to see, you know, in the months ahead, if there are things that we get right or if there are things that we get really wrong. So Dawn was thinking through this list of 10 things that have changed in our life since the pandemic. And maybe we'll just like alternate which one you want to talk about. So do you want to go first and talk about your number one on the list?
I number one on my list, I have 10 changes, but the number one, I think it's this pandemic fundamentally changed the human relationship. So among the people, and since the most interaction, we all go through remote. And when you have an in-person next to each other, sometimes I feel I'm guilty because the people say, oh, maybe you are virus carrier. So the people tend to either put a face mask there or they try to have a social distance. And for me, it's the kind of a mental barrier for me. I just feel we are no longer close to each other. And then it's the very defensive to the relationship. That has cost me some originally the people hug the close to each other and then kiss each other. Now it's the all gone. So that's the fundamentally the relationship cost me a lot of uncomfortable. I think that's the maybe turn into a little bit semi-permanent or permanent relationship. That's the relationship I don't like. I think this is the number one in my mind. I don't know, what's your thought?
No, I think you're totally right. And I think it's really sad. This is something that I talked about a lot at the beginning of the pandemic with my dad, which is that like normally when this kind of crisis event happens in history, often like for a country, it's something like a war where everyone's like really able to be together and like band together and spend time together to like get through a crisis. But in this case, like the problem is being together and we have to separate ourselves to keep everyone safe. And so I do like have, I think, a little twinge of sadness, like even every time I'm walking in my neighborhood and I like have to cross the street to like stay away from someone because I don't want them to think that I'm trying to get them sick. At the same time, though, I do think that I'm optimistic that this year will make people value the importance of relationships more because we've really seen what it can do to be so isolated from your community. Even like moving across the country during a pandemic and like trying to find and build relationships for myself. I think I have found that I'm more open to just being like, okay, I'm going to join this like book club or whatever that's on Zoom because I need people in my life and this is the only way to get it. And in some ways, like everything being online does remove some of the friction to social interaction because you don't have to leave your house. So it'll be interesting to see. I am really curious to see like how offices in the future will end up, offices and schools, how many people will stay remote or how many people will go back in person. But kind of like segueing to the next item, which is very related to this, you added the online dating trend. So do you mean that more people are dating online or do you mean that like like more relationships are starting online? Is that what you meant by that one?
My observation is I just label is the dating online becoming trend, and it's pretty interesting. And I think it's the people dating online used to be the worst thing to build the intimate relationship, but the pandemic just opened the entire door. People is have no mental barriers. They just open to this idea. It's that people just chat online all the time. It's a stranger. They start dating online and feel so comfortable. And when it's mature, and they said, let's take a risk to get somewhere so that we can meet real person. So I can know how tall you are, how how you work. Those kind of things are becoming very, very I don't know how to describe it. I just feel this entire trend that gave the young people or the people need the intimate relationship, one particular venue to start understand to each other. Of course, it's behind the screen, the people, the physical or body language actually is highlighted a lot. So, but go through the language conversation and goes through eye to eye through the camera, it also can tell a lot of things about the people on the other side. That's the kind of interesting. I don't know, what's your experience dating someone, or what's your experience?
Do you know anyone who's met online this year?
Of course.
I have like online dating accounts, but I have to say I don't really like it. I get bored. Like I'll start messaging someone and then I'm like, I spend all day looking at my computer. I don't really want to look at it more.
Yeah, of course. This is a kind of the paradox or dilemma. People really want to have some feeling and also have some smiling. They have a seventh sense, right? It's the people close to each other. They can smell the opposite, the other parties, whether they like it or not. But the online dating becoming just go through the screen. But I do see people, they after maybe 3 months, 5 months, the online dating, they become very, very good. And then it's a fly together, spend the night or week in some national park, become pretty good. Yeah, because people, they have kind of have some tolerance to the remote relationship. And when they physically see each other, the real person, they can accept whatever the difference may be imagined.
I do have a friend who met someone online this year, and they're in 2 different states and have never met and are dating. I think the other weird thing about pandemic relationships is people who were already in relationships that either got stuck quarantining together and it ruined their relationship, or they had just started dating and they were we're stuck together, so we might as well get married. I think it'll be really interesting to see how many pandemic related divorces, pandemic related marriages, and pandemic related babies will come out of this experience. One of my best friends got pregnant over the pandemic and her baby is due at the end of this month. So she's literally take this 1 year, had a baby and will have a baby in a pandemic. And so it's also such a testament to how I think resilient humans are, because life goes on. People are still getting married and having babies and moving across the country, even in this time of extreme crisis.
I can predict next year we're going to have a baby boomer. It's just that we call them a pandemic baby, because most people, they stick together besides sex, nothing they can do. So they create a lot of human being there, right? So it's each whenever they have a national or worldwide the crisis, either a war or it's a disease, the people stuck together, they cannot move. It's just I came from mainland China. It's it's in the countryside. When sun sets, all people have nothing to do because there's no light, and all the dark. So it's the population in the countryside, it's the double, triple every year. So it's they have nothing to do, just stay on the bed. So it's this pandemic, I predict is going to create a whole generation. We call them a pandemic baby, for sure.
On that note, you also noticed that we'll see children. We'll see a lot of really interesting impacts on children this year, because so many of them have been stuck in California. I think there's a few private schools that are open, but mostly the public schools are still remote and have been since last March. So they're studying online without in-person interaction. It'll be interesting to see what kind of interruptions to their learning, because I know, like, for a lot of students, like my siblings who are still in public schools, one's in high school, the other's in like intermediate school. Their spring semester last year, they basically got no grades and learned nothing. They pretty much just didn't have school from March 2020 until like August 2020. They didn't do much. So what were you thinking about that?
I think this is probably among the 10 trend or 10 changes. This is the worst things for the entire human being. Our children, especially the very, very small age children from maybe 3 years to 7 years, those kind of preschool, kindergarten children, it suffer a lot, because at that time it's the children need to have a social interaction, working together, play together, learn together. And at this moment, they have to stuck at home with their parent. The parent have like a 24 hours to supervise them to study, and they glued to the screen, and they don't have any friend. If they have a sibling, it's better. But if you don't have a sibling, the child life is the misery. And that's the worst things that among 10 changes, I think that's the worst. Public school is not open. Some private school open, but the parent very scared to send their children to the even private school. So it's overall, it's the very sad change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the next number 4 that you had is also like a sort of similar, but on the opposite end of the age spectrum. Old people in nursing homes not being able to have visitors basically since last March. I have a grandfather who's living in a nursing home in the Indianapolis area. We've been able to visit him outside, but I think also they're just, it has actually been good for them in some ways, because he lives in like a memory ward. So the routine of not having people coming in and out is in some ways kind of good for them, because they're a little bit less confused. But it's also been really hard on my mom to like not really be able to see her dad this year. But do you have any like personal experience with this, or?
Yeah, I personally have been 10 years in the Rotary Club. Rotary Club is used to be the people like 60 to 80, 90. That's they get together to have a lunch every week. So it's the people mingling together, talk to each other, walk from this table to that table, talk about their children, talk about their life, and whatever the disease or it's the healthcare issue, they can talk. But this time, all the senior center, they stuck at their own each home. And also it's a pandemic, it's a very fatal to elder people. So they tend to be more careful about the isolation, or it's the prevent the people to see them. That's the kind of things that give them some mentality. They cannot see their grandchildren, their children, and that's the cause they're extremely isolated. So it's the every opportunity they can go to the online meeting. I see a lot of a senior, they screw there, say, hi, I want to see you, but physically they couldn't. That's the opposite of children. And also you see a lot of a death rate in among the seniors is very, very high. So it's when people die, and we tend to attend to my friends the funeral or it's a service, all this canceled. So it's you feel very sad for the people or your old friend they die, but I couldn't to show or pay my respect at the last opportunity. That's kind of the things that I feel very sad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the inability to grieve is really hard.
Yeah.
So tell me about number 5. Lighten the mood a little bit.
Let's go to the some a little bit larger scale. I think it's probably in terms of economy, the most hated the industry is the commercial real estate. At this moment, not many people feel this way because it's a little bit remote and it's a time lag. So the impact is going to be show maybe after 2 years, 5 years, or even 10 years. But we see all the company, all the larger corporation, they start to adopt to new policy, remote or work at home, and they can feel they can save a lot of money on the office rental or leasing or even buy it. And also it's a lot of supportive stuff they can totally cut off to save the budget. But that's going to hurt real estate, especially commercial real estate. I think commercial real estate is kind of a backbone for this country, especially for larger metropolitan. If a larger cities, they lose the commercial real estate business, the entire city is going to suffer.
Yeah, I think the impact on cities overall, which I don't think we have on this list, but is a really interesting thing to think about. And I've experienced this, like moving to the Bay Area. Every time I tell someone like, oh yeah, I just moved here, people are like, oh, that's so interesting. Everyone is leaving the Bay. Like, what? Why are you here? It's so expensive. At the same time, I do wonder if people will miss cities. I mean, like my grandparents live in Idaho and they're always complaining about people moving from California and like the housing market, like prices increasing because people come with their like California incomes to live in Idaho and can buy these super huge houses and price out local people basically. So it'll be interesting also to see like overall like migration patterns, I think, for the country, because I know also I'm not the only person who has moved over the course of this pandemic. I moved here also with my roommate who was in college in Massachusetts with me. So there is still mobility. And so it'll be interesting also, like, I think this one that you picked hits on a lot of like really good issues, which is the future of work. Like, how are people going to think about going into the office in the future? Like working 9 to 5 has been such a huge part of our culture, and going to an office, you know, like you can even see it in our television shows, like with workplace comedies being so common, like The Office, Parks and Recreation, like, and so it'll be interesting to see how that like impacts our culture and society over time. On the one hand, the work part, and then on the other hand, like where will people want to live as a result of this? Or will people just become more mobile? I was actually in Palm Springs over the weekend, and I was like out at a restaurant eating outside and eavesdropping on the couple next to me who had, I love to people watch, so I can't resist eavesdropping. And they had rented a house in Palm Springs from Ohio, and they just came to work remotely because they could. And I know this from friends of mine who have coworkers that are just like moving every month to a different place. And clearly you're taking advantage of that too with all of your travel this year.
Yeah, exactly. This year is when I travel, I always go to visit the housing market, because you have a suddenly completely wheel where you can live. So I can travel around the country, say where is the best place I can live, because in the Silicon Valley, our housing market is so expensive, and suddenly you can choose anywhere to live. So you can pick several places. Every place you just buy small condo, buy small apartment, or it's buy vacation home. So you can go to different places. Maybe summer I stay here, winter I stay there. So you don't restricted by your working place anymore. So I think this trend is going to be continued. There's no doubt about it. That's my feeling about it. And also, I think you probably have a lot of friends that do the same thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, I actually think the thing that most of my friends are doing, because we all like graduated this year,
Yeah.
I am one of my only friends who's not living with their parents. Like
Oh,
I've moved out on my own, but most people I know are still living at home. Even if
yeah.
they do have a job, it's just nice to have that extra support in this time. And you're maybe a little bit less motivated to move to a new city when it's so hard to get to know people. So at
Yeah.
the same time as people being more mobile, number 6 I will bring up is that like people have gotten really good at home cooking. As I mentioned, I was fully on board with the sourdough trend, and I now make bread every week. I need to bring you some. I don't know why I haven't done that yet. When we meet in person, I'll be sure to save you. Have you learned to cook anything this year?
I feel pretty sorry. I just a totally disaster when I cook. It's nobody going to eat. So there's someone else always cook for me and change the whatever the international style, Italian, French, Chinese, all kind of even Middle East, the people try to change it. And if I do, I only can make some egg or it's the breakfast to put a sandwich together. I'm not very good on the cooking,
Who
but
all
the
were you?
people,
Oh,
but people say if you're smart, you're going to love cooking. That means my IQ is not high enough, right?
you just have to practice. It's a skill, like anything else. Who all were you quarantining with? It sounds like you had really good food.
Yeah, I stay with my girlfriend and she cook.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. Let's go
She
to the
seems
next. Let's go to the next. I don't want to
next.
talk too much of personal stuff.
Okay. So you tell me about number 7. Why'd you pick this one?
Yeah, number 7 is a more, I think it's a more serious and the people may not be interested, but I personally just feel it's important. I feel international relationship among the country somehow on the surface the people, the country becoming blocked to each other, shut off to each other, traveling, but fundamentally, deep inside each country's leader, they realize the human being or entire world is related to each other. It's a more cooperation and the more supportive to each other, becoming higher in terms of priority. So that in people, if we have a face mask, we try to support you. If we have a vaccine, we try to support other country. I think it's especially on the technology or the research R&D part, people, it's international cooperation became much more uh, rationalized or it's more supportive to each other. That's the good trend for the when human being face a common problem is a pandemic. You may not agree with, right?
This is one that that I'm a little bit less optimistic than you, which is
Or
unusual because I feel like generally you're the optimistic one of the two of us. But I hope that what will come out of this experience is that everyone realizes how interconnected the world is. But I just kind of worry that this will actually increase global competition, even when it comes to trade, right? Like if you
yeah,
think about it'll be interesting to see how the like ongoing like trade conflict between the US and China is impacted by this pandemic, which frankly, a lot of Americans, even if it's not government, a lot of American citizens, I think probably still harbor some resentment and maybe even a little blame towards the
yeah,
Chinese government for their initial maybe resistance to report statistics on the pandemic. And I mean, they did ultimately have a pretty swift response, but not swift enough that it didn't spread internationally,
yeah.
obviously. So I think I think there may be more global competition than you think in trying to recover from this. And I think there's also sort of that maybe perhaps that dichotomy between like service-based economies like the US and Western Europe and like manufacturing-based economies like China and India. Like how will services really, really suffer in a pandemic? Not as much as manufacturing. So I think also economically, there's a whole like interesting thing to see how it comes out. And really, I think we haven't seen that much global cooperation. You do have a good point in terms of vaccinations and like research and development. I think the speed at which we were able to develop vaccines. I mean, I know that there's the two American, the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccine. There's a Chinese vaccine. There's also a Russian vaccine. And I think there are a few others. So like the speed at which we were able to develop those is really impressive. And I think a testament to the global scientific community. On the other hand, there hasn't been a lot of coordination, for example, on international travel. That's sort of been on a country by country basis. And if nations had gotten together at the beginning and said, we all need to shut down for the benefit of the world, perhaps things would not have gotten as bad as they did.
I agree with you. It's my sense of this kind of a trend is based on the long term.
Mm-hmm.
So in short term, I totally agree with you. So it's there's a shutdown, travel ban, those kind of things. I think it's a short term. But among the international, each country's leader behind the shutdown, they realize there's a lot of cooperation needed among the country's leaders. So we may not say the immediate impact, but those kind of rational negotiation or cooperation is going to show up after more severe economic slowdown. So it's when economy going to go back to the normal and the cooperation among the countries are going to coming back. That's my just crystal ball from myself.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to combine number 8 and number 9 a little bit, I think, to talk about those. So you talked about healthcare becoming more and more relevant to our daily life, and also high tech trending, like AI kind of speeding up more automation. So I'm wondering if you see those two things as interacting with each other and how automation is necessarily, like, I think the healthcare's relationship to the pandemic is pretty obvious, as it is a health crisis, and more people are aware of perhaps how fragile they are and how what a need there is in our system to provide quality healthcare for all Americans, because one person getting sick really does affect everyone. But I'm curious about the automation piece. How do you see that as relating to the pandemic?
Yeah, it's the automation or AI to replace normal people or regular people, like a secretary or it's a cashier. Those kind of a trend is started, and driverless car driving everywhere. Those kind of are going to replace like a truck driver and the cashier or legal secretary, or those kind of things. A lot of jobs are going to disappear, but that's going to take 10 years, 20 years. The time frame to realize it's going to kill normal people, the job market. But this pandemic is really increased the speed of AI to replace the office clerk's job. You see a lot of people is going to lose job. At this moment, the government still give people some the pandemic check, or it's we call UBI, those kind of subsidy to everyone. But after government pay off, or is when pandemic are going to finish, the job market is pretty hard to coming back. A lot of people, they probably going to lose their job permanently. That's the things that I feel this pandemic speed up, accelerated this process, AI to replace job trend. So if this happen in larger scale, the social stability going to get a lot of trouble. The crime rate and also the jobless rate is going to raise a lot, and the national leader among each country is going to facing how we can deal with the real poor people. They cannot find job at all. Even they want to work, they couldn't find it. We have to deal with this trend. That's my concern.
Yeah, I think that's a really good concern. And I think it segues really well into your last point, which is that it's been a very existentially stressful year. having to face like your own thoughts stuck inside. So your last point is, I think, very in keeping with your personality and kind of reflecting on how this year has been a little bit of an existential crisis for everyone being stuck inside. So can you tell me a little bit about that point, and then we'll just kind of close up from there?
Yeah, I think it's this pandemic trend, and also it's what I think about these 10 changes to our life. I think it's we coming back to one central concept of compassion, and we need to build this kind of a compassion mentality to help to care other people, and not only among the country, but the interaction among the or real human people individually, and try to think of others and try to help others. That's the whole pandemic is going to cause for our challenge in the next years. I personally think it's economics going to go down very quickly. So it's the social and the compassion and those kind of used to be very abstract concept we need to apply to our human relationship and build a more stronger compassion. That's what I got.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's great. And I think you're totally right that I think that people are going to come out of this year having experienced, like, even if all it was just everything in your life being canceled starting in March 2020, that's still a pretty traumatic experience, especially the way everything sort of happened overnight. And if you weren't a person like me, who, like, I, for example, happened to be interning in a national newsroom at the time, so I had been kind of paying attention to the pandemic. Coming out of China, like starting in January, I was like reading about the coronavirus. I even actually like did some coverage about the like potential origin species of the virus. Probably came from bats, but there was maybe some intermediary species. And so I was like talking to scientists about this in February and thinking about the pandemic, like, oh, it'll probably come to the US, but like, who knows? And it was still surprising to me. So I can only imagine how shocking it was for people who weren't paying attention to the news at that time, because really the news wasn't covering it like this was something that was going to happen to us. So I think there will be kind of a society-wide levels of PTSD that we will see the effects of. But also I'm really optimistic that all of this time to like reflect and really think about what is meaningful in life will also give people, I'm hoping that we will get some fantastic art out of the pandemic. We've already gotten some like really good albums, like CDs.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I feel like, so there's been a lot of, what?
Share to the people.
I mean, like, I could say so many things. Like, you know, if you like pop, Charlie XCX did a great album in quarantine. Mm-hmm. Also BTS, the like K-pop supergroup, their quarantine album was so good. There's a bluegrass singer that or not bluegrass, he's more of a country artist singer that I really like, named Sturgill Simpson, who actually got COVID. And then like when he was recovering, recorded 2 albums that are both fantastic. Who else have I, like Taylor Swift, 2 amazing albums from the pandemic. And those are just like the ones that have come out so far. So I'm like really excited for when people have had enough time to write novels about this time or from this time. I'm so excited to read those.
Good. That's very good, Andy. I'm going to go to listen to all the albums.
I'll send you, I should make a Spotify playlist for our listeners of all of the quarantine music that I've been listening to. Maybe I'll do that. But that's a great place to end for this week. Maybe a note of happiness that, like, even though this time has been really hard, we can still make something out of it. So John, as always, thank you so much for making time for me.
Thank you.
My name is Katie Simpson. Our podcast is sponsored by Asian American Forward. You can visit our website at asianamericanforward.com. If you enjoyed the show this week or have a topic you'd like to hear us discuss on a future episode, send us your comments at info@asianamericanforward.com. We'd love to hear from you. You can also find us on Facebook and hear more of our conversations on our YouTube channel. We'll talk to you next week.
Thank you. Bye-bye.